Good evening. It's Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024 at 11 p.m. Central Standard Time. You're joining me for a very special episode of Co-op for Two, one in which most of you shouldn't be here. It's going to be full of spoilers. We're going to spend an hour or so talking about our experience playing the 7th Citadel. We've now played through a full campaign, the first campaign in recommended order called Dadachaem's Awakening. We've played it over 11 sessions, over 80 hours. Primarily myself, Jonathan Warner, Isara, Perry have joined us for portions of it. Cody and Autumn are here, who've played through the game on their own. Let me just check in with the chat. YouTube says 6 concurrent viewers, so that's about it. Everyone here in the chat is the totality of the people who are here, which is okay. It makes sense. And in some ways, this playthrough that we've done over 11 hours, 11 sessions, 7 hours plus, is sort of a throwback to playing a game on Zoom with just the people who are playing it. We've had very few other observers, and that's, I guess, a reflection of how odd a game this is to sort of join in on. There's a lot of games I play on this channel that seem to be more amenable to joining to watch. Although most of the games I think that we play here, I think to myself, who would watch this other than to go to sleep? But then this game seems like a perfect game to go to sleep while you're listening to in the background. So I'm not sure exactly what explains why it would be less watchable than the others. They all seem equally unwatchable. But this is a strange experience. And in my mind, I'm very curious to hear from Jonathan and Perry and anyone else about what the experience was like on the other side of the camera watching it. I mean, it takes a very special kind of person. I think everyone on this channel knows. People have posted on the YouTube videos about 7th Citadel who want to get into it. They have, a couple of them have said, how do I get my own Jonathan? Where do I rent Jonathan? It is, and people talking about how they've gotten used to me saying, what do you think, Jonathan? So Jonathan has been an integral part of playing through this game. I'm going to talk in a minute how I want to structure today's session. We're going to talk about our favorite parts, our least favorite parts. But really, I want to hear from Jonathan. I want to hear from Cody and Autumn, Perry, anyone else. And if anyone is joining us today who's played through this campaign on their own, I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't played through this campaign, though, and you think you might want to play the 7th Citadel, you should not join for this, because this is going to be full of spoilers. I'm happy to talk with anyone, happy to have anyone join us who's curious about the game and doesn't mind spoilers, and anyone who's played it on their own. I have recorded a whole bunch of top 10 videos on rules, strategy, enjoyment. So if the 7th Citadel interests you as a game, there's other videos you can watch, or you could start from the beginning of this campaign. But this is mainly going to be a session where those of us who have played it can talk about it. Let me do a little bit of bookkeeping before I check in with the channel. So on Friday, we're going to do a playthrough of a fan-made scenario for Bureau of Investigations into Arkham and Elsewhere. That's a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective spin-off game. And it's a fan-made scenario called Endless Winter's Tale, I believe. It looks very professionally done and produced. I'm looking forward to that. It's possible that we'll slip into 2-night session. I'm not sure. On Sunday, we'll be playing our second episode of Dear Holmes Letter. The last one only took us a half an hour to read through. If you're interested in joining for short sessions, that's a great way to join us. That'll be Sunday at 1 p.m., not our normal 3 p.m. We're trying 1 p.m. for this month's games. And then soon after that, I think it's time for another game design update and channel update soon. Okay, what else? So I've made clear this is going to be full of spoilers today, and that I want to hear from you more than normal. So I just want to say one other thing. I backed this game several years ago, and Greg and I, who started the channel with me, we played through 7th Continent. We played a lot of 7th Continent, and we really loved it. And when 7th Citadel got delivered, I had sort of resigned myself to not playing it. It took many years to deliver, and by that time, Greg and I weren't really playing games together. And so I feel very fortunate that I've been able to play it on the channel, that the channel has given me the opportunity to play it. And that's especially due to Jonathan Warner, because you can absolutely play this solo. And I think people watching these channels, and there are people who play games solo on YouTube, but really something different happens. This I did not play solo. It's only me sitting in front of this game, but really this was played with the channel. And we were talking, Cody and Autumn, who played the game, boyfriend and girlfriend, who played this game together. We're talking about how important it is that they played it, the two of them together. And I really think, although we played this solo as one character, it's a totally different experience playing it with someone else. And I really encourage you, if you're going to play something like this, you could absolutely play it solo, and maybe you're the kind of personality that gets complete satisfaction over that. But this really does feel like an adventure, and stories are being told, and it makes a huge difference to experience those with other people. even if it's just to commiserate when things go wrong, it's a very different experience when you have no one to talk to about it. And part of what we're doing today is we're here to talk about it, talk about the experience. So there are some things, some questions I have that I'd like to hear from other people, and then some things I'd like to look at, and then some things to discuss. If there is anyone else here who's played the game on their own, you can chime in whenever you like. Okay, so let's see. Jonathan says, I'm glad people enjoyed me tagging along the whole time. I was worried at times I was being a backseat driver. No, never. Okay, so I'm trying to think how we should structure this. I have the other purpose of this is to sort of flesh out some thoughts, get your thoughts and flesh out my thoughts for recording a long review. I can see this is going to end up being one of these hour-long reviews that I record, and I've made some slides. We could sort of go through those and talk about issues as we go. But I did, let's see. So here are my slides I'm working on. I did make a first slide just to remind me some things I wanted to talk about here. Is that all of them, or is there no way for me to know? Okay, all right. So here are a couple questions to start us off. I mean, I think I'd just like to hear from Jonathan, Cody, and Autumn some quick overall views. Maybe there's a reason these come in one at a time. Okay, so let's hear from the channel. I want to hear, or do you have a different theory for a different idea of how we should do this? I mean, should we recap our campaign first, maybe before we talk about it? I think, what's the best structure for this? Here was our last scenario that we played. We popped out of the foundational underground here with these jars, and we had to bring them home. We were in new territory, and then we came down here trying to look for a way back home. We figured out where we were on our larger map, and when we did, we walked our way home. Okay, so Jonathan says it would seem like in the spirit of these games for a recap. Okay, so why don't we do a little recap of the campaign? The campaign started by having us play an introductory scenario and choose a character, right? So we chose our character among several. All right, we're going to do a little recap, and you guys chime in whenever you want. You can talk about your thoughts as I recap about our choices. So we had a set of characters we could pick. There they were. You'll remember when we started quite a while ago. And we picked the kid that wants adventure. Not much of a fighter, but he likes adventure. And we picked him and we said, we're going to give this kid the adventure of a lifetime. And we did quite a bit of role playing in this game in terms of making choices. We said, what would this kid want? And we tried to give him an adventure. And this is the same character that Autumn played. And then we built up his stats. The game has you build up stats. There's a huge amount of customization for your upgrading. People complain that the characters don't feel all that different. It's true, they don't have special abilities, but they have their own deck. And we got to customize that. And we gave him stealth and not brawn. And then we played an introductory scenario, which was sort of the escape from this crumbling citadel. And you have to play that every time, every campaign. It's odd. I guess it starts you out with a couple things. We also got, when we played him, his special backstory thing about how he was bitten by some plant. We never found his thing. I wonder if Autumn found his thing if we overlooked it somewhere. Autumn says, let me see if I put these up as we play this time. Autumn says, I enjoyed playing Arthur and planned to play him for the third threat, played someone different for the second threat. That will be a question we have to answer if we play again, if we take a different character. Autumn says she's going back to Arthur for her third quest, and she never found it. All right, so we escaped and then we started our quest. So let's do our little recap. What did our campaign look like here? We started out playing No Smoke Without Fire, which was what? What did it have us do? Identify the... Oh, we saw some smoke in the distance. Okay, we saw some smoke in the distance, and we started hunting all over for it. In fact, I do have our complete built map. Where is it? Let's look at this for a second. So here is the map we built over 9 sessions. Over 11 sessions, 9 maps pieced together, different little subsections. We had a very interesting first scenario where we went all the way south, looking for a way. Did we go all the way south on the No Smoke Without Fire, or was that a different mission? No. In this mission, first mission, we got on a boat. That's what happened. We met this lady. She wanted a pot. First session. Met this lady. She wanted a pot. We never found her pot. We searched for a pot. We found so many fancy weapons. We never found a pot to give this lady. But we did get on a boat. And that boat took us right to the city of Kel, which felt like we were there prematurely. Eventually we left. We weren't strong enough to... They had tolls they wanted us to pay. We eventually did find the smoke coming from a caravan that was near this inn, and we rescued them. They were from Waterbank. They came into our camp. Jonathan says the boat ride was one of my favorite parts. Was it that something interesting happened on the boat ride, or just that it was so interesting that we were suddenly popped? Like, it felt like we were going off script when we got in that boat. Like, we didn't know whether we were getting brought somewhere that we shouldn't be anywhere near. All right, so we did find those people. They came back. They had been attacked by brigands who we did things in the wrong order. That's what happened. Because we were in Kel, we didn't find all the traces of the caravan. We just went backwards. And then a guy was drowning, right? And we let him drown, and then we had to go back and try to rescue him. It did feel like we did things in the wrong order. I can't remember if we let that guy drown. I think that guy drowned. I don't think we could save him. Isn't that right? I think we tried to save him and failed. Is that right? Cody says, we went straight east and found more survivors. Yeah, I think we may have not been able to save that guy from drowning, is my memory. He was right over outside Kel that he was drowning, right there where that 158 is. Very strange world, and that boat ride did feel like we had gone off script. However, we did make it. We didn't fail anything. I'm not sure there was a way to fail it. I don't even remember which conclusion we got. Jeremy says, from Switzerland? No. Okay. Okay, our next mission was get fed or die trying. Now, the other thing we did is we started on a course of upgrading our community. And we made one very good decision by luck, which was Jonathan had us go towards a number. So there's these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 special upgrade numbers. And we were curious what they might do, and Jonathan had us pick upgrades that brought us to those, and we got very lucky. Jeremy says, okay, Jeremy has been playing 7 Citadel. It's great. And they found the art of the symbol of Arthur. Okay, all right, so here's my question. Was it in one of the places, was it on a square that we visited and didn't notice? And if so, then I want to hear. So here's our map that we've built over the course of our gameplay. If it's on one of those places we've already been, then absolutely I want to hear where it was. Do I have a chat with the, I don't think I do have a chat with the screen. Jeremy says it's in Waterbank. It's in Waterbank. Very interesting. I do have an image of Waterbank. Let me see here. Why don't we do it this way? Let me bring up my images and see if I have Waterbank somewhere. Is that Waterbank? Yes. Okay, here's Waterbank. Jeremy says it's the first customer of the book. The book guy, when we first get there, is this guy here in the center at 344. That thing. So are you saying when you talk to this guy? Oh my God, there it is. Look. There it is. It's the banner. It's his banner. Look how fun that is. Yes, it's the flag. Oh, that image is right there on his banner. That's so sneaky. Okay. So there's an interesting story. It is quite interesting, you say, Jeremy? I'm sorry we missed it. Well, maybe we may go and read that. We may peek in getting it. Okay. John says just reversing it got us. I'm not sure what that means. Okay. Oh, it's opposite, yeah. Very interesting. Okay, that's good to know. Fun. All right. So we got lucky with our upgrade in that was one of the best upgrades, which is a little bit spoiled. Autumn says, don't read it. I don't want to be spoiled. Okay. Jeremy recommends we actually play it. Okay, so we'll leave that unspoiled. If someone takes Artham, if we take Artham again, we'll go check it out. Gives us a little bit of motivation to take Artham again. All right, so the next set of scenarios, next scenario was building up our provisions of our camp and finding those birds. That was the second scenario, right? Birds. Marsh bugs that give us the birds. So in that scenario, we went south. Now that was when we tried to follow the map south. And we tried to use the map and we went all the way. Was that the one we were trying to find the road? But anyway, for the birds, we had to go south. And we found all these little birds in various places. It was kind of scary. I've heard people die on this mission. Maybe this is where there was the lady with the pot. But those birds, that was the closest we came to dying, I think, hunting for those birds. And by the time, there's one over here. By the time we got to found enough birds, we were scared we were going to die. And we did rush home. Another one up there. Okay. But we did get the birds. Did anything else happen to us on the way here? I mean, we really did almost, it was scary. There were some dangerous things back here. It was down in an area where we didn't really belong. We tried to avoid going south after that. I don't think we ever went down there. Again. But it was fun looking for those birds. Okay, then what was the next scenario? The pumpkin. Oh, yeah. Okay. So then the brigands came and extorted from the community. And our mission was to go find out if they're still there. That was a strange scenario for us because what happened was we found it. It took us a while. I think this was this the one where we went all in the wrong direction? Yes. This was the one where we tried to use the map to figure out where to go. Is that right? We knew we needed to go up here somewhere. And we thought we could travel on the roads. We knew we couldn't get up through this mountainous pass. And we tried to hit this road and go around. And we went all the way down and we couldn't find it. We went all the way down. We went down past here and into an area we shouldn't be. That was too tough for us. Got very scary. Then we went up, then we went back, and then finally we went up through here. We did find our way through. And when we eventually did, at that point we were, by the time we finally got up there to where the Citadel was, past that carcass of a giant tortoise, by the time we finally made it up here and got to the Citadel, if you'll remember, we were trailing a herd of goats that I was very, very reluctant to lose. And so we decided not to even go down into the Citadel, which felt very strange because it felt like that was our whole mission, but we were scared of dying and we had this whole herd of goats that I was desperate to bring back. And so we just did an about face as soon as we found it and went back home. But that turned out to be okay. We had found enough and we did get the goats home, although it didn't do much. Cody and Autumn say it was pretty painful watching us make that mistake as we were walking in the wrong direction, but it was kind of fun that it let us go wherever we want and almost get ourselves killed. All right, so we got back without the best outcome, but with good enough outcome that to know that the place crashed down. And then you could have gotten this bad outcome if things had gone wrong. We did eventually go back to that Citadel, remember? And it was dangerous down there. Very small, though. Okay, but we didn't get the captive because we did well enough. Maybe if we had gone downstairs, gone into that Citadel, we would have gotten in trouble. Okay, next scenario. What was the next scenario? Send a carrier to bring back blocks of stone. Yes, okay, so our next scenario was bringing back stone. I don't remember that much of this, but I do remember we had to travel on a road. So in this scenario, we went east. That's what brought us east. And we found a quarry and we had to bring it east on the road, and we had to repair the Singing Lane road. That's right. Oh, we start at the quarry. Is that right? Where was the quarry? Because there was a mine, but it was somewhere in here. So that's the mission that brought us farthest east. Maybe this is all up here, is the quarry, maybe. Okay, and so we brought it west. We repaired the singing lane. There were some oddities about that mission in terms of trying to understand whether we had to stay on the singing lane and certain repairs, but we saw how it used that system where when you're playing a certain scenario, different symbols on the card. So we got different things, broken down areas of the lane that we had to repair, and we had to bring it home. It was pretty fun. Jonathan said once again he was trying to bring us in wrong direction, but we did learn to ignore Jonathan's sense of direction. We finished that one reasonably well. And then we had a mission called If You Want Peace, Prepare for War. I think this was the one where we had to make a choice. Did we not make a choice here about how we wanted to tackle it? Let me see here. I thought this was the one where we had the choice. You need to have a bullocks and wagon card and the highest possible defense score. Maybe not. Maybe we just needed defense. One of these ones we had a choice. Okay, so... And then depending on what? Read conclusion C. What was this about? Did we do this? Oh, I know what it was. It's because we didn't play this. We didn't play this one, right? Because we had a choice. Is that right? Yes. Convince the henchman to switch sides or prepare for the confrontation. So we were able to convince them to change sides. So that's what happened. This was a case where you had different scenarios. Autumn and Cody, okay, so Autumn and Cody did the same thing we did. You chose the route of peace. So it's war, war, and peace. So instead of doing this scenario and fighting them, we instead got respite, which was our break scenario. So is it that we skipped a whole scenario because of that? Is that what happened? You have no choice. You have to fight them. 24, 25, 26. Okay. Conclusion B is they join us, go to 27. Conclusion C, 24, 25, 26. Okay. So conclusion B was the one we did where we go right to here. Okay, so we skipped the scenario, basically. If we had gone to war, we would have had to play this scenario. So we skipped this whole thing, but then read... Oh, and then this would send you to here. Okay, so we skipped the whole scenario because we prepared well. Respite was the intermission. Cody says, no, you do bread and cares instead of prepare for war. Oh, I see. If you want peace, prepare for war. Oh, we had a choice here. Okay. Either way, we got this intermission, which just let us go wrap up side quests, which we did, and we wrapped up a whole bunch of side quests. I think this was the one where we went to Kel, and we had a real adventure in Kel. We met this woman, we let her perform on stage. We had what's this little creature here? No. So during that mission, we went to Kel. We wrapped up some side quests. We played this gambling game that was fun. We stole from the woman. We did good deeds, Jonathan says. We got rid of our ring that had been haunting us the whole game, reducing what we could carry. We met this nobleman in the street. We tried to spare him in embarrassment of getting kicked in the butt, and the whole town turned on us, spit at us for being disrespectful. But that was the turning point, because then we were like, F this town, and we stole from that innkeeper. And we brought out this item to this guy here who we had met in this caravan here, who has these arrow slits, I forget what they're called, and we brought it back to him. And he said, oh, good, I've got this new chastity belt. It's what I've been looking for. And we got a good weapon from him. But that was a very fun adventure we had in town. John said, there's still a view. Okay, I can turn that off. Okay, Jonathan says it was hogging the screen. All right, sorry about that. So we did have a very fun adventure in that town. We finished a bunch of side quests. Maybe we'll talk about the side quests at the end, because we've got a ton of them that we started and finished most of them. And we did a bunch of that in our intermission here. That was a fun little idea to give you time to do anything you wanted. Remember we got this one where we got this terrible book that seemed totally useless, and then the surprise of noticing here, it happens to say, hey, if you happen to have this side quest, which seemed so odd, so unlikely, but it was there. Then we discovered a secret message in there. We had to get help from the puzzle solvers, and it unlocked a pretty cool thing. Let's see. Let me catch up with the chat a little bit here. Autumn went too far northeast, got stuck. We both did the same thing, recruiting the bandits. Autumn says, I love the book thing, how that works out so perfectly. The book we didn't want turning out to unlock the side quest was another favorite part. Yeah, I was strongly considering throwing away that book. It was a book on carrot planting. It was so ridiculous. But it does tell you something else about how the way the game was designed that we can talk about. Okay, then this was one of my favorite parts, I think, when we heard about this town of Waterbank, and before the big showdown, we go on this research mission to Waterbank and to go to the Great Library. And that's when we trekked all the way north, and we found Waterbank, which is right here, the center woman here. And in Waterbank, which I've brought up the photo because we were being told by Jeremy that we missed a very important item in Waterbank, which was our personal quest, which I can see now in retrospect is there, but we didn't notice it at the time. In Waterbank, in this whole area on the left of your screen was a library, and we encountered another puzzle. This one was a very well, I don't know if very tricky is the right word, but it was sort of hidden in plain sight. And it was a very enjoyable puzzle that we had to chew on. And Jonathan Warner is the one that figured out what we were supposed to do there. And that's what gave us the answer to how to beat these caterpillars. Cody and Autumn, how did you do with this library? Did you right away know what you were supposed to do? It felt like a little mini game. It felt different. It felt like a little puzzle escape room game. It didn't even feel like we were playing Seventh Citadel during this quest. There wasn't any combat. It's fun how the cities and towns aren't really combat. We let our woman perform again on stage. Cody did it and Autumn did it differently. They say they hired the bookseller. Interesting. So you did not have to solve that puzzle, is that right, Autumn and Cody? You did not have to solve this water bank library puzzle. You did it differently. You hired this bookseller in the upper right. It did seem like there were two ways to solve it. One was to go into the library, and one was to talk to this guy in the upper right and get him to help. Autumn says, yeah, if you hire him, he goes back to the library with you and gets you the book. Oh, cool. Okay. So maybe if you have barter items, you can do that. I'm not sure we had the barter items to give him at that point. Okay, so two ways to solve it. Pretty cool. All right, and then having figured out what to do about the caterpillars, we had the penultimate scenario where we had to go into the underground and bring out the jars of the caterpillars. That was another complete change of pace mission, right? That was where we, let's see if I can bring it up. That was our underground. Yes, okay. So that was our underground, which we entered in the bottom left and traversed all the way up looking for jars. We had it was nerve-wracking underground there. We didn't know if we were going to have a hard time escaping. We didn't know how much health we needed when we got home. We didn't know how many jars we needed. So we were nervous about that. And remember this well down here? Whoops. Remember that well? We found this well, this string, this rope heading down, right? We spent a lot of stuff to go down into that hole. Autumn says we stayed until we got all 5 jars. Wow, okay. We go down in that hole, and we find ourselves looking at an underground full of worms, and it said like, oh, do this test or you fall and die. I think twice down in this underworld, it was like, if you fail this test, you die and your adventure is over. It was scary. It was scary. Like, it was definitely possible to do it. Like, here it is. Look, it's a chain 2. And if you fail it, you die. I mean, that could get you in trouble. You could lose that and die. I don't remember if we had it. I don't remember if we had a choice to abort it, but looking at that now, you could die that one. You could absolutely die. Jonathan was asking, do you remember how many times you had to reset the dungeon to get all 5? 6 times. Wow, a lot. But we learned which ones didn't banish. So there were some, we felt like that felt like it was a bug that needs to be eroded, that we were able to get 2 jars twice. 1 jar twice. And Autumn says there's also a jar in the fog. Interesting. Did you not have any concern, Cody and Autumn, that you needed health when you finished? Like you were willing to risk your entire life. Did you guys play on story mode or normal mode? That's another question I have. I guess this recap is of what is meaning. Well, I put off asking all the questions I want to ask. Okay, well, when we finally got out, the game paused in the middle of this. Oh, so Autumn and Cody did play on the easier story mode, just like we did. Okay. We got out our carriers. It turned out we did enough. At this point, we had gotten our whole town to maxed out options. So we felt pretty good about it. And then we had our... Okay, so that's when it stopped. The end, when we got out of the underworld, we found a roof to climb out of, and we took it. And then we had our last session, which was just getting home. Basically just getting home. And that's the one we played on Monday. Starting here, making our way home. I know that Cody and Autumn got to this guy who offered to drive them home to the Citadel, and took it. We walked around quite a bit, mapped out, met this woman who was cool, found our hidden treasure map, which was very cool. And then, so Autumn and Cody took this, which was errata to not let you take it. But we did something similar. We were on the hunt for these unveilers. And Jeremy has some nice words for us. I appreciate it. We were hunting for the unveilers, and we took our teleporter. Probably that's also against the spirit. I was thinking later, you know, we're supposed to be with like 6 people carrying these jars. Probably the one-person teleporter, we left those people while we teleported with all the jars. Probably we shouldn't have done that. But in looking at the cards, nothing would have made a difference in the slightest. So Cody and Autumn taking this, us taking the teleporter from here, I guess, really didn't make any difference. Home was not that far away. It was not critical. We weren't going to die. Autumn says teleport card shouldn't have been in your inventory. I don't think it was in our inventory, but either way, it didn't make an impact in the game at all. But thematically, I think we should have said, we can't take this teleporter. We can't risk the jars breaking, and the rest of the people can't do it. Jonathan is also reminding us of another story element, which was so cool. We had this package, parcel to deliver, that was supposed to deliver to this guy, to Vesnia. And the errata took away the Vesnia mention here. So when we got here, Jonathan was like, if that was not going to let us give it to her, let's just open it in front of this guy. And we opened it, and what was in that package was a letter that basically said, kill the messenger of this. I have found the people who attacked your someone, which I guess was us, defeated some people that were related to the woman who lives there. And she's like, I've tricked them into bringing you this parcel. Now you can get your revenge. It was very cool that we didn't do it. So Autumn actually had that parcel as well, and they delivered it, and she tried to kill you. Okay, that's very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, it's too bad that Jeremy can't join us for talking about the experience, but I can tell that Jeremy enjoyed the process. Jeremy, if you come back and watch this after you get back, watch our discussion. I'd love to, if you added any thoughts about the game and any of the issues as a comment. All right, so that's very funny to hear how Cody and Autumn got handled this differently delivering the package. It was interesting that these creatures didn't do much to harm us. I mean, this last scenario, bringing the jars back, was surprisingly tame. I really thought that we were going to have jars breaking constantly and really be under serious threat, but we really weren't. It really was not that hard to get back. Did Cody and Autumn, did you have the treasure map that let you find the treasure that we found here? It was here, right? Oh, no, it was here. Here was our treasure map. The last scenario in the next threat is not tame. Be prepared, says Autumn. Okay, interesting. So we brought it back, and it was quite tame. But then, after we got them back, there was a whole battle we had to have. And let's see. We had different options depending on how well we did. So when we add up our stuff, and we were way past all this. Autumn says, we did find the treasure hunt, the treasure map. We did get the burglar suit. Arthur loved it so much. Yeah, that was a very cool piece of armor. Okay, so we got back here. We were so well prepared that we got the best outcome, the best final fight. I can see, though, if you weren't well prepared, if you got a worse ending, then it looks like you have to do some extra fighting before you get to the final fight. So the final fight that we had was battling this creature. And if you were worse prepared, you have a couple things you have to do before that. The worse it is, the more you have to do some extra. The worse you're prepared, you have to do some extra stuff. You have to lure the creature into the Citadel. 43 and 43, okay. So the worse you're prepared, it doesn't make it easier for you. If you're not so prepared, if you didn't do as well, if you didn't bring as many jars out, you have a harder initial thing you have to do before you have to beat the final fight. By the time we got to our final fight, we had this amazing combination that we just walked through this guy. We had our special magical sword, and we had our special one in a million card that let us generate the magic power to power it. So we had these two things in our hand, and with these two things, we were able to just keep channel in our hand, which we carried for that whole scenario because we knew we were going to need this combination. And this let us do 6 damage every time we struck, and we just destroyed this creature. But Jonathan and I had the same sort of feeling at the end, right? Like we felt way overpowered when we fought this guy, but like this is, we were prepared for it. Like this was the whole course of our mission, was getting these two things in hand. We had to work hard for these. We had to work hard for this. I forget exactly where we found it. We went down into the water. We did a lot of stuff to get this. This might have been the chastity belt guy may have given us that. But we knew as soon as he gave us this, that this was our weapon. This was what's going to make this work. It doesn't break. And then when we found this combination is insane. But I have the same view as Jonathan. Like it felt overpowered, but it felt like that felt appropriate, that by the time we got to the end of this scenario, this quest, it was time for us to be overpowered. And then we didn't have to do too much game optimization to figure out how to beat this guy. And maybe we will talk about that from game design perspectives. All right, so there's our little recap. And then we got an ending, and I was looking at the ending. The ending is congratulations. And after you fight him, if we had failed, if we had lost all of our helpers, I'm going to show you the card that you would have gotten if you failed. So if you want to look away for some reason, you can look away. But basically, it's very short. It basically says the creature cuts through, it advances. There's no survivors. Ignoring the survivor. Where is it? Let's just see what it is. It advances you with a heavy step, ignoring the survivors who think they're stopping it. They're only ants to this beast, which sweeps away with a blow. It opens its foaming mouth above your head. You do not even try to flee or defend yourself. Your adventure ends here. Okay, so that's it. This is the final way the quest ends. It was a little odd that we didn't get a story element. We didn't get to read a long epilogue of what happens to our community. It just ends here with this battle, and then it says you defeated, everyone's happy, it's over. It did feel a little bit like there should have been another couple pages wrapping it up. Wrapping up the story after so much story building. It was an abrupt ending. Sounds like Autumn and Cody felt the same way. Cody and I wish there was another respite center, tie up loose ends, more side quests. It's true that we ended with some side quests. In fact, we were so focused on this that we never even broke open this parcel. We never delivered it. But I don't want to know the secret to this, because there's a good chance if we play another scenario, we'll get a chance to deliver this again. But there were side quests that would have been nice to complete, or at least... I didn't mind that it was a forced end. I didn't mind that these side quests that we didn't finish, we might have a chance to finish another time. I just thought there should be a little bit more of an epilogue. A little story of Arthur's future. Okay, so there's our long recap. Any other stories that I've forgotten that we went on? I mean, there were some other cool moments where we swam across the bridge to get to some castle. The tortoise shell that had creatures living in it working was very cool. We met a dog. We rescued a dog who befriended us, who really helped us out, and then got scared away by the arrows from the fort. Jonathan says, I like the mention of the blue giants, even though we didn't meet them. Yeah, we went into some area to the northwest that we were clearly not ready for. And we learned a little bit of lore about them, and they were terrifying. All we could do was run away. So presumably in another mission, we'll talk to them. The turtle shell people were one of my favorite parts, says Autumn. Any other stories? I mean, I loved the exploring. In the end, remember in the end, we got this extra little bonus strange story about the statue that came out of the ground. There were the unveilers that we never managed to get the gold unveiler, but those little unveiler stories were fun. All of the cities were particularly fun, I thought, and a really nice change of pace. So we've got the outside world, we've got the foundational dungeon, and then we've got the cities. I really enjoyed the cities. They were a totally different change of pace. There are some parts of Kel we haven't fully explored, or we got locked out of, we couldn't visit. But we had our person perform there, lots of fun stories there, we did lots of good deeds. Jonathan says, the dog running away actually felt like it happened at a thematically appropriate moment. Yes, it's true. That was a pretty cool moment. Like, we knew that getting past these traps was scary for the dog. He did actually do it for us, but he did have to run away, which was sad. It was also another really fun part of this game was that we ended with our full troop, right? We had our full troop of people made it, even this dead weight that we were carrying around the whole game. But we decided thematically that he fell in love with her, and so he was carrying her around. This, our apprentice arcanist, was the most powerful thing. She saved our whole, she was responsible. Without her, I think this would have been a totally different experience, which was the second thing we've learned from our upgrades. We learned how to power up very well. That one upgrade that lets us increase our hand size, and then knowing to get her seems absolutely key. And then Autumn was saying about the alembic pieces, which we learned how to get them. I think we could get them on a second playthrough or another threat, but Jonathan is asking Cody and Autumn, without giving us secrets, without giving us any spoilers about the alembic, Jonathan is asking whether Autumn and Cody felt like it was fun when you did find it. It was fun for me, the story-wise, to get this whole gang at the end, have them all survive. This guy we met in the dungeons, that was pretty fun. Remember our first mission when we were escaping from the Citadel? We had a very scary moment where we were trying to get some key from some guy locked in a room, and we had like a 1 in 6 chance of blowing the whole place up, destroying this, killing this guy, and that's what happened to us. So I guess that's going to be different if we play it again. Autumn says it's probably worth doing it to experience it once, sure. But not worth doing again. I see, okay. Any other cool moments? I mean, we found lots of cool books. Getting the goat with the sack of grain was pretty fun. We found some good spells. There were some times when we played music. Remember we met those Tords and Jonathan was like, don't play the flute for them. Just walk by them. And the get card was like, oh, you walk by them and draw this card, and then we had to fight them. There were lots of bartering. Remember when we got this hat just so this woman could perform on stage? And every time we passed the stage, she was like, please let me perform on it. And we're like, we shouldn't use you to perform. You're not good at this, but we let her do it anyway. Then we had this whole crazy thing where these jars kept getting combined with jars so that we could cure people. That was kind of fun. There were lots of times in this scenario where we did things that were where we ran out of our real world energy, and I started making bad decisions. But this was really the thing that made the difference for us. We got some cool spells. All right, so what we'll do now is, Autumn says they got the third jar. They never combined to get the third jar. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a little break, our 8-minute break. Everyone refresh your tea, stretch, then we'll come back and we'll talk more about, we've talked about stories. We're going to take our break. We'll come back. We'll talk more about sort of game design issues and if there were parts that we would like to see improved, but lots more discussion. I want to hear more from Jonathan about the experience of playing this, joining me for this remotely, if parts of it were exhausting. Okay, 8 minutes. I'll see you then. We're back. Let's see. Okay, so Autumn was telling us about the new Kickstarter has a new box. I was looking at it in the Discord, but it does look like there's only one new threat, so that concerns me. We'll see. Jonathan says, The two instances where watching as a stream would drag a little were some of the longer compound action fights and occasionally just us drawing a bad series of fog exploration cards. As a result, it feeling like we spent a lot of time or energy covering a small distance. Yes, I can absolutely see that. I think, you know, that's the heart of the only real problem here that I have with this game, was that the combat encounters, I mean, this is sort of jumping out of turn, but let's talk about it for a second. This is a game that is does such an amazing job of creating these adventures and stories and sense of exploration. And one of the things they changed over Seventh Continent was these compound actions, like you saw on the final quest. And it's clear that like this one here, it's clear that they've attempted to make these fights more involved, more intricate, more strategic, demand more optimization from you. And they do succeed at that. These compound actions with these character traits and consequences in different ways really do make you think about how should we optimize this? What's the most important one to win or lose? How should we do it? It does create a much more meaty optimization puzzle. However, I guess there are a couple problems. The first problem is that it really does grind things to a halt and really stop your game and put you in a totally different game. Instead of exploring and discovering and having these adventures and stories, you get involved in this multi-step drawn-out thing. And that doesn't translate that well to the stream. Autumn says, to be fair, that happens when you play in person too. Although this feels like it could create some real downtime if only one person is doing this fight. But I suppose that if I was talking to Autumn, one of the big questions I had for Autumn and Cody was, how did playing this as two characters work? But I guess with these forced fight actions, forced with the compound fights, you can take turns attacking it, and you probably would, because you're going to use up the cards in your hand to do your first shot at him, and then the next person would have their hand full to do the next stage of battle. So they were taking turns. So it actually, a lot of my fears about the multiplayer seemed like they weren't founded, but it does really draw things to a halt. And as far as Jonathan sitting there waiting for a 15-20 minute battle to be over, when it's really, there are too many details for Jonathan to help with the optimization of choosing what cards and how many to draw with the time delay. It just wasn't possible for Jonathan to be involved in these combats. And it's to Jonathan's credit that he could manage to, I hope he's got some reading material on the other side of the camera. But I can absolutely see how that would be a real deal breaker. And I'm glad that it wasn't a deal breaker for Jonathan, but I can see how it would be rough. This and the exploration, which are sort of these little short interludes every time you want to take a step. But actually, I want to talk about this in terms of where I think the one area of this game that hasn't been solved by these designers, and some thoughts on that. So obviously you can tell, I think this is an amazing game, and the real sense of exploration, learning, curiosity, adventure, storytelling is so rich in this game in a way, in a long form way that you don't see in any other board game with these exploring this world. And what's interesting is that if you look at some of the modern developments in dungeon crawling games, Jonathan's made a comment. I'm going to come back to this in a second and tie this in. But if you look at some of the modern developments in some of the modern dungeon crawling games, and I think they're maybe taking the cue from a game I haven't played, Kingdom Death Monster. But one of the features of this class of games, which focus almost entirely on fighting monsters, is that they make fighting a monster like a story, something that you would have stories to tell about it, because each monster behaves completely differently. Each monster is a puzzle that you don't know how to solve when you first encounter it, and you have to learn how to beat it, because one of the common elements of these modern games is that there's a deck for each monster. Gloomhaven has something similar. And when you first encounter that creature, you don't know how it behaves, you don't know what it will do, you don't know how it will react, you don't know what story is going to develop as you learn about it. And so it makes facing a creature part of this exploratory process of discovering something new. And that's missing from the Seventh Citadel. From the Seventh Citadel, when you meet a creature, this is our final creature. So in here, it actually does have a card. You don't know what's going to happen. But basically, this just tells you the game's ending. When you meet a creature in the Seventh Citadel, here it is. This is the entirety of it. There's no surprise. There's no learning how it reacts. There's no learning about it. There's no getting better at beating it. It's just this little optimization puzzle, which feels like you're sort of on a spreadsheet. And I think that's the piece of this puzzle, piece of this game that hasn't been solved by them. And it's sort of jarring because it's so different from the rest of this game. And I think what you need to make this feel more fitting for this world is that I think you could put it into two parts, which would really make it ideal for this world. It should be that when you encounter a new kind of creature, it's got its own little mini deck so that you don't know how to fight it and you don't know how to beat it. And what your encounter with it should be much more of a mystery, much more of a discovery. And Jonathan was saying one of the ways you could do that is more interaction with the dialogue book, which was like a little choose your own adventure. And we did have a creature, that spider creature, Spiter, which was very strange. You choose what to do, then you jump to another paragraph. So I think something like that. And I think the second part of that, which would make it work, which would address some of the grindy nature. So I'm proposing a two-part solution. The first part is that when you meet a new creature, it should be a mystery. And it should be a mystery of unfolding, exciting adventure. Like you don't know how it's going to attack you. You do something and then you discover it's got these poisonous pincers. And then you're like, oh my God, that's what it does? Or, oh my God, this happens. It should be a story that you can tell when you're finished. Like we told so many stories about our quest. None of the stories involve fights with creatures. Very strange. So that's the first thing, that encounters with creatures should involve them having unfolding things that happen. And then I think the second piece of that solution that would really be the icing on the cake, and solve the grindiness is if, after you learn how a creature behaves, after your first or second encounter with it, then you should know how to defeat it very easily. Like, you should learn its weaknesses from encountering it, and then be able to bypass it, end the battle very quickly with it. And I think that would address the two problems. The first problem is that combat is not fun, funny, mysterious. It's not an adventure. And then the second problem is that it's grindy, because once you've met this creature and had this long battle with it, you're going to be walking around and getting into fog and having to fight it all over again. And that's when it's really a slog. We had a bunch of places in our playthrough where after 6 hours, we encountered this creature the second time. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to go through the motions of defeating it. I know we can defeat it. It's going to cost us 10 cards. And we frequently just were like, let's do this inefficient thing that lets us bypass it. And we did have a nice card from Arthen that lets us bypass it. And I think Autumn says they used it quite frequently. And I think I would probably use it a little more. But don't you think that's the way forward? And I think it's worth spending some time thinking about how you could do that. I mean, what that would exactly look like. But I think that would be very satisfying. If the first time you meet a creature, it's much more a trial and error, storytelling, exciting adventure, mystery, curiosity to learn how this creature behaves. Maybe some creatures you end by killing them, some creatures you end by them running away, some creatures you end by reconciling with them. Have it be a real interesting, unfolding surprise what happens. And also make it so the next time you meet the same creature, you can just be like, stab him in the ankle with the spear and he's gone. That's how it should be. And that would really dramatically change the combat experience to make it much more in line with the adventure exploration element of the game. And you could even make the case that it would make the initial encounters longer, but they would be part of the exploration process, whereas now they're just sort of in the way. Learning their music was a weakness. Kind of. Although, because of the nature of the game, you couldn't, you didn't have the option to use music on them until it told you could use music. And then at that point, it was pretty obvious to me that we should use music, but Jonathan did not want to play the flute to those toads. But that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, though. It should be that the first time you encounter that, or if you read a book, then you know how to beat it. The only counterpoint that I think needs to be said about that, which is tricky, is that it does need to be said that part of why the Seventh Continent feels so epic, part of why it really stays with you, these stories, is because it's so long and because it's so time consuming to get 4 squares away sometimes. And it needs to be said that all of the, you can't have only candy. You can't have it all be fun and easy. The only way that those story moments feel so satisfying when they work, when you get something good, is if it was punishing to get there. So you do have to be careful. You can't get rid of all of this grindy fluff, but I do think there might be a way to make the combat encounter part more interesting, more satisfying. So, Jonathan, I agree with you. I hear you completely. Maybe we should have used the fight card more, but even I still think my suggestion about the way forward makes sense to me. Any thoughts on the camera stuff? So, or maybe, but wait, before we get to camera, I mean, Jonathan, I do want to hear more of your overall thoughts with the game and stuff like that. Cody and Autumn, so we talked on Discord quite a bit about the multiplayer rules, and maybe it's worth talking about that for a second while Jonathan is putting together some of his overall thoughts about the experience. So I had a real concern about the multiplayer rules here. In the 7th continent, you got everyone has their own inventory. I would never play this with more than 2 people, but even with 2 people, when Greg and I play it, each of you has your own inventory, but you have one deck that you're drawing from, and that means decisions are made together about how to draw cards from this deck, and you both are following what's happening with this deck. And in the 7th Citadel, you each have your own separate decks that you're customizing on your own. And my real concern with any game like that, like Arkham LCG, etc., is that I find I can't really pay that much attention to what's in the other person's hand and deck. There's too much little reading, too much details about the statistics of each person's hand and deck that you really, at least I, can't really follow what's going on in their deck and what options they have. So you can't really help with that. And so for me, that seemed like like I wouldn't want that. But Autumn has sort of convinced me that they're taking turns, they're mostly going together. It's just that my main concerns didn't seem all that well, at least Autumn and Cody didn't have a problem with those rules and liked it better that way. And I guess there was an initial confusion on BGG about some beta rules about when you want to get involved in someone's actions, you have to pay a block a card, but that's not in the rules anymore. Some cards let you deliberately get involved in someone else's actions, so you could build up your deck for that. But it sounds like for the most part you might be just during the combat encounters alternating back and forth for the most part. I still think I would be inclined to play with only one solo character, but that's the beauty of this system, the 7th Citadel, this evolution, is that you could still play one character if you wanted to as a group, or play each with your own deck. I almost wonder if there would be a way to have only one character on the board, but each have different decks. I'm not sure. But at least some of my biggest fears about the multiplayer rules seem to be allayed. Cody and Autumn says it worked very well for them. Jonathan says the art was great. I mean, no one has to convince me that having the right partner for co-op games is absolutely essential. That's a lesson I learned. Most people know I won't play co-op games with them. There are only a handful of people on the planet that I really will play serious co-op games with. That's what I have found. John says, I think the idea of breaking up into these little scenarios worked well, much more manageable for the streams and for yes, I mean, I absolutely think that most of the changes they made here, I think, were really great changes, and a huge one was breaking these quests, threats, curses in 7th Continent up into manageable scenarios, which took us 7 hours. Most people will take only 2 or 3. But I agree. I think that worked very well as a game mechanic, breaking up the scenarios, but also did help us for the streams to be able to say, even so, though, Jonathan, it took us 2 streams to do many of these scenarios. Landscape art is gorgeous. People aren't very good looking. It's a cruel world. Well, it is. It is so. Autumn agrees with the format to the curses. I mean, I agree completely too. Some people. There is a very interesting thread on BGG from someone who loved Seventh Continent and didn't like Citadel, and it's worth reading that thread to see that these changes didn't work for everyone. But I agree, they all worked for me. And yeah, there is something so exciting about exploring this world. The art is beautiful. This game has its own personality. The humor in this game really comes through. And it does really feel like it's a vision of people, the two designers who have a real vision here, both in terms of the negative outcomes that frequently happen, how harsh and punishing the world. But yeah, the art really works for this. It's very evocative. There are occasional hidden numbers, but really, it's so weird. It's like an alien world. It does feel like an alien world. John says, I probably enjoyed the parts involving the dialogue book the most. Maybe that's just being used to story-rich games from all the mystery games. So exploring the cities were always a highlight. Yes, I agree, though. Exploring the cities were one of the highlights. Seeing the interesting plants and ruins was always fun. I do think the one area of Seventh Continent that I preferred, though, is I do prefer the thematic setting of being sort of in a sparse world where there aren't many people and where everything is a mystery. This game came with its own backstory and lore, and everyone knows what's going on. I definitely prefer the Seventh Continent setting and theme a little better than these conscious plants and stuff and magical wizards. But I still like this quite a bit. Autumn says, whenever a scenario is strict with what you have to accomplish, especially if there's a time element, I get stressed. I prefer time to wander. I don't know if I feel the same way. I think some tension and stress on those things is a good thing. Autumn says, Autumn has told us a lot about the second threat, which are the drums of desolation. Is that right? Being worse and tough, more tough. But you did enjoy it. Have you started playing the third quest? No, you're taking a break before your third quest. Let me bring this a little closer here. I guess I have a question for Jonathan about whether Jonathan is ever wants to play another threat, or if or if 80 hours is enough. Jonathan says, I did kind of go in with wrong expectations for the setting. Not sure why. For some reason, I thought it might have a more gothic feel. I think I know why. It's because the initial images of the Seventh Citadel that they shared when it originally kickstarted looked like knights and soldiers in a dark world. I don't think there was a real hint of plants and stuff and fauna in the original Kickstarter. I think it might have been images of the Citadel and people in the Citadel like Gothic knights. Yeah, so I think that's why you got the wrong impression, because the Kickstarter original stuff gave the wrong impression. But there was lots of lore to discover, and some people in the lore, like the Worm Master that we haven't met yet. Setting was unique. That's absolutely true. Why don't I have this view up? I should have this view up most of the time. Okay, I do want to talk about briefly the camera and stuff for this. This was a real challenge because there's so much to show. The map is so big. We did have my cubes that were able to zoom in. The top-down camera, it's a $2,000 top-down camera that I purchased largely motivated by this game and games like this, where we want to be able to zoom in on a card that's not in the purview of my close-up camera. So you don't remember, but with my previous camera, that would have been a lot more blurry because it's digitally zooming in on something far away, compared to when we can use the close-up camera. That's a clearer image. And then if I block the close-up camera, you can see here is the $2,000 camera, more than $2,000. Okay, but I do appreciate the Patreon supporters helping purchase that, but it does feel like this was the first game that we've really benefited from that new camera. Now, there's a lot of green in this game, and sometimes the cubes did malfunction. And I'm getting a little bit better about remembering to shift views, but there were definitely moments where I had the camera on something like this while I was saying, I'll play this card, then I'll play this card, and that is unfortunate. I'm not sure there's a good technical solution to that. I did put a new view that would let us see my hand of cards while we were planning, and we did make use of the green screen overlay. So we've got sort of a far view, a close-up view of the cards, and a close-up view of one. I think that this green screen did make all the difference. This little thing here for this game, having this green screen that I could show while, and lots of channels use the green screen, but the combination of being able to show the hand and the card, I think this did work. And this was a useful thing that I could show the hand while we're doing this. Probably not often that we needed to use the hand and the green screen and the top down. And maybe a different view would have been better for some of that. But it was helpful to be able to have two views. And I don't know how watchable it was. It's really only mattered how watchable it was for Jonathan. But Jonathan, if you have suggestions of how I could have done some of that, what would have been more useful to look at? If I should have spent more time on the view where we were looking at the hands, if I should have spent more time planning actions instead of just doing them. In general, because of the YouTube delays, I tend to just do things that require lots of steps. I just do them on my own, but I am open to suggestions. Autumn says nice things. I mean, I guess you guys might feel not obligated to say nice things, but there are other people live streaming playthroughs. They look very nice. Jonathan says being able to stitch together the map on the tablet and drawing on it worked well. That was fun. I do think that did work reasonably well. One of the things that does concern me is I've seen some other playthroughs, and they're much more likely to keep a view like this, where you can't really see the details, but you've got a nice, steady, constant view of the place. And one of the things I do worry about is like all of the zooming in and zooming out and all that stuff, and changing to this view and changing with the hands and the cards, that maybe makes you a little dizzy and seasick, and maybe it would be better to like keep it on this view, like just this view and this. That would be another option. Like just keep the top-down view and one close-up view, and not worry about zooming in, showing cards in hand, not worry about zooming in here. But the truth is that my eyes aren't that great, and sometimes I need to be able to see a space on the screen with you guys rather than seeing it in real life. And what's happened now? So that was the other little bit of challenge. Did I turn it off? Yes, I turned it off. The other little challenge here was so much green and magenta that occasionally it would get confused. But I do worry that all the zooming in is going to make you seasick. Cody says, I like the zooming in. Okay. Cody says, we use the feather cards a lot more. Jonathan says, I don't really have any issues with motion sickness from zooming. I think I have a slightly higher than average tolerance for not getting motion sickness. So I'm not the best person to ask. The feather cards, that was an interesting thing. That would be maybe that's another area where I think there might be room for improvement. Jonathan and I did not have that much fun with the feather cards. Like, the idea of mapping is so fun for me in this game. Discovering parts of the area, mapping new parts of the area, building that map was so intriguing. And I really thought that we were going to get to be able, by using the feather cards, that we were going to be able, to discover new areas. Like, I really thought that using the feather cards were going to be like, get us access to areas or find a way to get somewhere. But really, they didn't. They're a little bit fun, but you basically just felt like occasionally we'd get a card that said, hey, if you can see this on the card, you can start there. Well, it just gave us a way to start there, be a little bit more efficient, but having something on a card never let us go somewhere that we couldn't otherwise go. We built these two at the end and never got to flip them over, so we're not going to look at them. But other than getting some ability that says if you can see this on a card, then you can start here. Was there really a value to making the feather cards? Jonathan says, I respect the idea of having this outdated map, being able to update it, but I wish maybe the rules for how it would have worked had been a bit more explicit. I just wish that the maps were like treasure. I wanted it to be more like a treasure hunt. Like that if you build these maps, you could find a place to go to that you wouldn't otherwise know how to go to. Like discover that there was some city somewhere that you wouldn't otherwise think to go to. Autumn says, the feather cards do give you access to different places or let you read more lore. It does let you read a little bit more lore. John says, interesting how the people you're sending out to map the world have to follow real world geography. Yes, thematically you're being told that you send them a place and they have to find a way to get there. You can't map to the north until the scouting party has mapped out past a ravine to the east. There's so many new ideas here. It really is shocking how they could have just made another version of Seventh Continent and just added a couple things and it still would have been amazing. The fact that they've done so much. I think that plastic thing probably was not necessary. Probably just gave you a stack of cards that you could lay out in your own map would have been sufficient. And it's kind of annoying to have to deal with that plastic thing. But Autumn and Cody says the feathers are useful. They built a lot more feathers and they weren't disappointed. So, okay. I think maybe if we played it again, we'd try to heed that advice. It doesn't seem to me like the feathers rewarded us that much, but we'll have to take Autumn and Cody's word for it that the feathers worked for them. Autumn says, we clipped our map to an easel at the back of the table so we could reference it as needed. I really do wish that the map had been more useful, though, in terms of navigating. That would have been more enjoyable. Jonathan says, we started getting feathers too late. And the fact that the map wipes out between games, between campaigns, was another reason why it wasn't so... It doesn't seem like it was that exciting. But maybe we would cheat on that and just keep our maps. John says, we wanted to map new places we'd be going to in the north, but we really weren't getting there. Cody says, we kind of used it like you used the screenshots. I see. Well, that makes some sense. You weren't taking photos. You weren't taking screenshots of locations. So instead you used the feathers, like feather maps like that. That makes some sense. Okay. Let me see here. So what were your guys... I assume the favorite parts were well, okay, let me hear from you. What were your favorite parts? I don't mean your favorite story elements. We've all talked about the stories. Do we each have a favorite story element? But I'd also like to hear what your favorite parts of the game mechanically, just as a piece. I'm trying to think. What was my favorite? I mean, my favorite aspect of the game is the exploration, building this map, and the storytelling, having these stories. I don't know any other game that sort of stories are linger with me. Like, I remember a story from Seventh Continent when we climbed up this icy mountain and discovered some frozen guy. And in this one, I remember the Noble, the Ring. I mean, those stories are memorable. Cody says, I enjoyed the deck customization. Autumn says, my favorite part was how weird the world was. I love the alien worlds. Getting to discover this one has been awesome. That's interesting. Well, I wouldn't say... I mean, I do like the strange world, but this setting isn't my ideal setting, so I wouldn't say Autumn's thing, and I definitely wouldn't say Cody's thing about the deck customization, although that was fun. But I think maybe what I would say is the broader version of that. The upgrading. The whole process of deciding how to spend the upgrades, which involved deck building, which would involve the building unlocks. That is like the dopamine thing for me. That completely grabs my attention. The idea of we're having this long campaign and trying to plan out how to upgrade and build our character and get stronger and better and unlock things as we go forward. That has to be my most pleasant surprise of this game. That was so enjoyable and such a rich experience in terms of building the deck, getting the skill upgrades, getting the buildings that powered us up. To me, that is one of my favorite parts about this system. And I did not think that was going to be the case. It felt overly wrought to me, looking at it on paper, all the upgrade stuff. But really, it's very satisfying. Jonathan says, exploring the cities, the stories in the dialogue book. I'm trying to think how I feel about the stories in the dialogue book. I mean, I really did like them. I do remember, though, the first couple that we read felt like turn to here, then turn to here, then turn to here. And I thought, do I really want to be doing this? It does feel like a little bit of an interruption to the game. One of the costs in playing, if you played a computer game, would just all smoothly flow together. But here you're moving around on the table, and then you're getting the book out and turning to a page and turning a page and trying to remember what page you came from. It's a little bit, feels like you're shifting, a little bit slowing down the flow of the game. However, I have to admit, it's quite satisfying to get those branching stories. Cody says the whole community booklet is cool. Looks like we've lost the chat. We're still connected though. Everything's fine. Let me just try to restart my chat. Where is my restart chat? Restart chat. Let's see if that fixes it. Yes. Okay. Jonathan says, digging up the potentially dangerous unveiler treasures. Well, this is exploring the world, finding ruins and landmarks. This is one of the geniuses of this game, that we started playing early. We were digging up these treasures. We got some cage. We opened it up and we found this ring. This ring got put on our finger. It reduced what we could carry, and it haunted us for like half the campaign. Half the campaign, we had this ring that was in the back of our mind, gnawing at us, hurting us. We had to work very hard over a long period to get rid of that ring. It was it's one of those things that a novice game designer without a vision would avoid, maybe. Like, don't give the person this thing that they couldn't have avoided that sticks with them for 30 hours. But there's a real payoff that comes from giving the person the burden for 30 hours when they get rid of it. It really feels like a story and accomplishment. Jonathan says, the game gave us more side quests than I thought it might for not having built the tavern. The game did give us a lot of side quests, and I found those side quests quite enjoyable. Really fun. You feel like you're getting a little treat when you have the opportunity to get one and complete it. And we completed a bunch of them. Some we tried to avoid, like that Mirror of the Soul. We got rid of our Ring of Repentance finally. We cured these people at the Poison Hamlet. We stole the guy's chastity belt. We brought back this guy's telescope. That we had to win this bug gambling game that was fun, puzzle. There were a couple that we couldn't figure out how to do, like finding these gold coins. We just never came across any of them. There was a couple we ran out of time. There was this really weird one we got right at the end of our campaign where we found this guy's arm encased in this gelatinous orange gel. I really wanted to do this one, but we didn't get the chance, but I hope we will get the chance. One thing that sounds like Autumn and Cody have to go. That's fine. Thank you for joining us, Autumn, and thanks for all the talk about the multiplayer rules. One of the things that's not clear to me at this point, and maybe Autumn and Cody would be best to speak to this, is how much it's going to feel like work to play more quests that are where we're seeing the same things again. Like, it's clear we would see a bunch of these side quests again if we played a new quest that's going to have some overlapping terrain. And one of the things that's not clear to me is how much overlap there will be between threats and how much will be retreading old storylines and old encounters that are no longer enjoyable because you're doing them over and over again. It is a design choice that they've made that, you know, even though you've found this path, you know where it is, you still have to explore the fog each time you play. And it would be great if you didn't have to do that. That would be amazing if they could make a game where once you've explored it, you don't have to do that fog anymore. But I do think that would run the risk of being too much candy and make it just go too quickly and not feel as deserved. But I do worry about some of these long encounters having to do them over and over again when they've lost their charm. Jonathan has a very interesting question. Did you and Autumn follow the normal luck rules, or did you end up using the fortune telling? How did you feel about the luck mechanic? Well, that is a great question. From my standpoint, us creating that house rule about luck and the fortune teller hut was one of our most brilliant moments. That completely changed the experience for me. Now, I think you could argue that maybe it made it too easy, that maybe we should increase the costs of using the fortune teller hut mechanic. But I am so glad we did that. I mean, that luck mechanic card is so unpleasant for me. It's like the opposite of what I want here. So I am so glad we came up with this fortune teller hut, but I could absolutely see wanting to making the cost higher there. And one of the many questions I have for Jonathan is, I put that question to you, Jonathan. What do you think about our using the fortune teller hut? Do you feel good about it? Should we have made it more expensive? Does it take something away? Did it feel like cheating to use it? And then a related question I have for you, Jonathan, is how do you feel about playing on story mode, the easier mode? I think for many of our scenarios, we ended back at the Citadel with so much extra health that we wouldn't have had much of a different experience if we played on normal mode. In other words, if you look at all the extra cards extra health that we saved, the only thing that playing on the story mode does is it uses up less health to refresh your cards. So I think probably if you looked at our playthroughs and the amount of health we had left over, I'm not sure that it would have made any difference if we still would have survived every mission playing on normal mode. However, we absolutely would have been more terrified to be walking around on low health. When you play solo, you can't, if you get into a mission and a combat and you die, your whole campaign is over. At least with two players, if you get into a combat and one dies, the other person can revive them and run away. Cody says, not a huge fan of the luck mechanic. We used Hope Reborns instead of Glimmers to retry our luck. So you came up with your own house rule about Hope Reborn being used? I didn't want to give up our Hope Reborns because the upgrading was one of the most enjoyable part, but I think I'm okay with the Glimmers being used to pay to redraw a luck card. So if someone's watching it and doesn't know what we're talking about is this house rule that we invented and has been tweaked a little bit on Board Game Geek, and it is on Board Game Geek in different forms. So I wouldn't be opposed to, however, saying that instead of 2 life points, maybe 3 life points to pay for it, to pay for redrawing. 3 life points is quite a high cost, although in story mode, I feel like we never really worried too much about our life. I wonder if there might be some intermediate to playing on easy mode. Like we played on story mode, we had plenty of health. I see. Cody says they made a house rule and we returned them instead of blocking them. They're still attainable. That seems like a reasonable thing. So here's an idea about story mode. I have a little bit of misgivings about story mode. I'll tell you why. I definitely don't feel like it was the wrong thing to do. We did want to explore more, but my concern is that we returned to the Citadel with plenty of health. So we probably could have played on normal mode and not much would have changed, except we would have had very low health at the end of our scenarios. and we might have died, which would have technically supposed to end the campaign. So I wonder if it would have added some more useful tension if instead of playing on story mode, so story mode says when you refresh, you pay, for every 3 cards you refresh, you pay a health point, and normal mode would be for every 2 cards you pay a health point. So I think I might prefer a rule that said play on normal mode. That means for every 2 cards you spend a health. So play with the extra tension of being afraid to run out of health more. But then have a rule that says when you get down to 0 health the first time, you sort of get an extra chance. So it's like you go into a second chance mode. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think rather than playing on story mode to have it be cheaper to refresh, it might be nice to play a game where you play on the normal mode, 2 cards to refresh each hand. But if you get down to 0 health, the first time you get down to 0 health, you sort of reset yourself to whatever extra you would have gotten from playing on story mode. So like maybe if you get to 0 and you die, then the game gives you 20 health and you continue. Maybe you get a third of your health back that you started with on the scenario, something like that. So that for most scenarios we would have played and succeeded on normal. Maybe you can even have a consequence for getting to 0. Like you get to 0, you have to kill off a building or something. Something that was enough danger to make it a real threat to worry about, but didn't end your campaign. Because right now I feel like we didn't care. We weren't very concerned about running out of health. And that may have taken a little bit of the tension out of it. So I don't want the full harshness of if you get to 0, the campaign ends, because that makes you, especially for a solo game, it makes us, if we ever got down to like 15 health or so, we started getting really scared. And I think it would be nice to let us go down and say, look, if we ever get into an encounter where we get to 0, it's not going to be the end of the campaign. That's too, it's made us too loss averse to think that the campaign would end. That doesn't feel right. Feels like it would be better to say if you get down to 0, then you're in then a bad thing has happened, but your campaign isn't over. Cody says 2-player was tighter. We ended at 1 HP each a couple of times. Yikes. Okay. All right, Jonathan, what's your thoughts? What was your thought about the fortune teller and about playing on story mode? John says, I agree the idea of losing the campaign does seem too strong of a punishment. Yeah. It's not just it's too strong of a punishment, but it feels like it could happen too suddenly, especially with single player. You could get into one combat and lose a whole bunch of health, but maybe that's not really true. It's hard to lose health in this game. But you could get stuck somewhere and have to spend 10 cards. If you fell down the hole, yeah. I'm going to propose a new, okay, well, I guess that leads to my next question. Jonathan, what's your thoughts? No, I will take no offense if you're done with Seventh Citadel. We played a lot of it. It was very enjoyable. If we never play another moment of it, it's still a wonderful experience. But I would be willing to play another campaign after a break, after a rest. But how do you feel about, have you gotten your satisfaction from Seventh Citadel, gotten your fill? Or might this be a game you would buy on your own and play with your own friend in real life, but maybe not stream again? I can see that happening as well. Sort of curious what Jonathan would say. I could always play this on the stream without Jonathan. It would be a totally different experience, but someone would watch and be like, oh, let me keep him company for a little while. So, but I am curious how Jonathan's, I mean, it's clear Jonathan enjoyed it, but it's hard for me to get a feel for how exhausting it was to watch. Let's put it that way. And what do you think about, Jonathan? You still haven't answered me about whether the Fortune Teller's Hut was too strong and whether you feel like playing on easy mode was too strong. If we didn't play on easy mode, it would also be a shorter experience because we would have had to return sooner than we did. And what do you think about my idea of a different way to play? John says, might be busier in the near future, so I'm not sure I could commit to another campaign right now. That's fine. Please do remember, everyone who watches and plays along with me on this channel, your real life comes first. This is what you do with your spare extra time. Don't let this channel be a procrastination tool. What else should we talk about then? Any other thoughts about, we've talked about favorite parts, least favorite parts. John says, I didn't not mind the fortune telling hut. Philip Campbell, longtime worker, says, just finished the first threat, heading into the next one with different characters. Okay, Philip, welcome. I'm glad to hear that you've stopped by. Do you have any thoughts on the game as a whole? I would certainly be inclined to try to build a very different deck, but I am kind of attached to Arthen. But I guess we'd probably take another character just to see what it was like. But I'll tell you one thing, though. From our experience, both Jonathan and I agree that the combat was our least interesting part. Now, that's not going to be true for everyone. Some people really like the micro optimization of how to best handle a battle. But I do think that if we picked another character and built another deck, I would do so with an aim towards minimizing the amount of time spent in combat. Now, we picked Arthen purposely because we said, let's pick a guy who's not strong, who's stealthy to avoid fighting, and he does have that one card that's really for that. But there are other cards, other players whose deck are more for fighting, and I assume that we wouldn't want that because we would want to avoid fights. But maybe that's not true. Maybe if you get a character who's better at fighting, he can make quicker work of the fights. Cody says, I really enjoyed a spell casting reflex deck. Philip Campbell says, loved it, met on the combat, going to lean into it with my new decks. Okay, that's kind of what we're talking about. John says, if you plan on playing all the campaigns, playing on a slightly harder mode would probably make sense, spread out the content more throughout the campaigns. Yes, that makes some sense. Philip says, going to choose combat and leadership rather than magic. Well, I don't know if you guys, we had a magic woman with us the whole time and felt like she was doing all the magic. We didn't need to. It is interesting to hear Cody saying he leaned into the reflex actions because the reflexes seemed the least enjoyable part to me, but I could absolutely see how it would be a viable way of playing because you'd get many more successes with your card draws. Philip says she was great. That's exactly it. That arcanist woman. What was so weird to me is that like she seemed essential for our game, the apprenticed arcanist, and we got her she's from a building, the arcane well. Like if you didn't know to build this, you would never get that arcanist That seems like your game would be a lot harder. That feels like one of those little secret, just like knowing these upgrade numbers, like this upgrade number, spoiler alert, was super useful, whereas a couple of these were terrible. So it seems like that's an aspect of this game that's a little unusual. They're really not that interested in balance here. And I think maybe you just can't balance a game that's so open-ended like this. But I don't think the designers are all that interested in balance. But in a game that's so much about exploration and discovery, that feels okay. It's like, okay, we've discovered this thing, and now we would use it in the next campaign. I really like that. John says my internet died. Philip Campbell says she's all I need. Yeah, that Arcanist was really essential. We had another fun story moment, remember, where we had our Arcanist, right? We had Arthan. We had our Arcanist, who was essential for everything, this dour-looking woman. And then we picked up this girl who is sort of dead weight, but our guy had a crush on. And we said, when we let her perform on the stage several times, we said, we're probably going to get to a time when someone has to die. And it's going to be this girl who's led a good life, because this girl's getting protected at all costs. And sure enough, when we went into the foundations, there was a little bit of a trap that someone broke their ankle. And we said, and Jonathan said, I know who's Jesse is going to break the ankle. And this girl just volunteered. She broke her ankle and she protected this woman, which was her sole job. So that was a very fun moment there. The other question I had for you, Jonathan, was about playing on story mode. Philip, did you play on story mode? I don't know if I would work on that reflex deck, but it might be interesting to try it. Philip says, I love doing a chapter, watching your playthrough. West Coast makes it hard to stay live. Well, I appreciate hearing about that. Yeah, I don't know if I would go that. Those reflex cards, I do not like cards that make the process fiddly. And we got some skill upgrades that made the process fiddly, and we just avoided using them. The ones that let us look at the deck every time. It's kind of annoying. Philip Campbell also played story mode, but added all the expansions. You added, there's one expansion that I made a video about top tips, and one of them says don't add in the one expansion that makes the game harder. And it sounds like Philip threw that in there. Jonathan says, my answer is basically, I think it made sense for us to play on story mode just in case we only played one campaign and wanted to see as much of the world as we could. I see, yes. I think, though, I'm going to propose another variant. I can see making lots of variant buildings, but I'm going to propose a different variant than story mode. I think, and maybe Philip and Cody and Autumn, give some thought about this idea. Since all of us here have played on story mode, it looks like we enjoy the exploration more. Give some thought to this idea of a hybrid story mode. I guess the thing I'm trying to propose is a game that still lets you do as much exploring as we did. Maybe even a game that would end up yeah, think of it this way. You could almost say that what you're going to do is give yourself the same health you would get from story mode. So imagine if every time you refreshed, you charged yourself the cost of 2 health per card, but you put a little, kept a little tally of how many health you would save if you played on story mode, and then make it so that if you die, you get that health back, but you pay some cost, like you lose an upgrade. So I'm just, basically all I'm suggesting is I want to give the extra health, but I want to throw back a little bit of tension. And I do feel like when we played, we weren't worrying about taking health cost because it felt so generous. Philip says, the 2-player hand limit sucks. I think adding the tough expansion will balance story mode. I like exploring. Philip, are you playing with another person? Is that what you're saying? Another complaint about the game, there's so many great things, but in the list of things that could be improved, one of the things that was odd about the game is that it felt like we were finding lots of items that we were just very good items, but we had better items. We were just dropping them by the wayside. The world was like so filled with weapons and armor. It was silly. And I wonder if there's a solution to that. Philip is saying playing two-handed. Okay, well, that's Greg's style of playing two-handed. That's too much for me to keep track of, but that is it. You're playing two hands with two sets of decks. Again, that's one of those things that strategically I can see I would add an extra element, but it's too much for me, for sure. Played with my son until he gave up. This would be a rough game that would challenge the stamina of a younger person. John says, I think the weapon armor is probably just an issue for solo. More players, they would need more. I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true. I just wonder if there isn't a way to fix it. I think there are two problems, actually, with all the armor and weapons. The first one is what we've said already, that there's just so much of it in the world. It felt kind of silly and weird that we were dropping it all the time. I think the other thing is that they did start to feel a little samey and not exciting. Like, we found so many swords and armor, and they were all sort of the same thing. It was only that one magic scepter that we had that was powered by magic that seemed kind of cool. But most of the weapons and armor we found were very boring. Philip says armor should be barterable. I think that makes sense. But I do think maybe that's the one, Seventh Continent felt a little more like items and weapons were rarer and more interesting. And I do think I missed that a little bit. The world is still amazingly interesting and curious, but the weapons and armor, weapons specifically, did not feel all that interesting. We got this bow and ammunition. It was so hard to find ammunition. We got the bow. It's like, is it really that exciting? Is it really that interesting? Like, I felt like it would have been nice if we had to work hard to get that bow and then it really changed things up, but I'm not sure it did. Little nitpicks, though, okay. It might have been better if it gave us the option to draw a random barter trinket or armor weapon. That's a nice idea. John says, it felt like the expansion pack books really overshadowed the base game books. Yes, the books and versus the double-side expansion. It is exciting to think we only saw a couple of the books, and there's a whole bunch more of them we haven't read. I am curious about getting more books. Cody says, armor and weapons are barterable at one of the buildings in a way. You can turn them in for defense. That was the other thing. We really worked on upgrading our community, and I think maybe I wouldn't do that so much if I were to play it again, but who knows what the other threats are like. Philip Campbell said, hated not having barter stuff when a trading story opportunity came up. Yes, I hear you. We had a couple of those. Remember we met those one troop of people and they knew about a hidden city? And they're like, if you give me 3 barter items, I'll give you something amazing. We're like, 3 barter items? Who the hell's walking around with 3 barter items? Not us. We would have had to give up a lot of stuff to get that. And that was a little too much. Let me see if I have any other questions. I mean, I have a whole bunch of review slides that we don't need to get into. We've spent 2 hours here, but let me just see. What do I have here? The bridge we built that charged us. Yes, absolutely. Okay, these are just my thoughts here. just see if there's any elements here I want to talk about it. These are all things for me to talk about in my review. Nothing really we need to talk about. Let's see if there are things I don't like that we talked about. We talked about those. We talked about that. Okay, so we talked about all the things that, saying I don't like them is a little harsh, but these are things that I think could be done a little bit better. There were my concern about the multiplayer rules that Autumn and Cody have mostly convinced me aren't a big deal. Although it does feel like the walking is kind of annoying, but maybe not. This was my theory about how to improve combat encounters, feather cards, theme and setting. Okay. Some talk about the various kinds of push your luck. I really think this 7 Citadel does that well. Just going through my review points to see if there's anything here I want to talk about, or maybe this will spur some thoughts on your part, things you want to mention. I did like the element of this that was so epic and long that it started to, our real world stamina started to come into our decision making. We were like, should we go back to Kel? And we were like, we're tired in real life. We've spent 7 hours. We should come home. I like that element of games. It's very rare that that comes into play, but it's sort of along the same lines as making decisions, role-playing decisions. Here you're sort of role-playing decisions, but you're also bringing your real-world tolerance into play. Okay, and then I did want to mention this review that I think is worth checking out about someone who didn't like it. Okay, well, that's my review slides in case anything spurs any discussion. Okay, Cody's heading out. I think we're about wrapping up here. Jonathan says, as a story nitpick for this campaign, I think it would have felt better to have an antagonist who develops over the campaign. Jonathan says, in this campaign, I guess it was tied to the subversion of Dadachaem still being alive. There was the bandit leader. I still think it would have preferred to have a more human antagonist. I think you're right, Jonathan. I mean, that ties into the fact that this campaign threat sort of ended with a little bit of anticlimactic. But it's true that we were so scared of what was going on in that other Citadel and this idea of this creepy necro druid and dangerous brigand leader, and they were never really an issue for us. So either it's a missed opportunity, or maybe we're going to get more of that in future campaigns. But I do agree with you that that's part and parcel of this campaign being a little anticlimactic. We didn't really have a villain. We didn't have a real antagonist and villain. That does feel a little bit of a missed opportunity. Philip says, I thought the stocks guy in the new beginning would return. I let him loose. Okay, don't tell us what happens if you let him loose. We tried to let him loose and we blew up that whole place. Philip says, yeah, just a bug at the end. Cody and Autumn have played through the second campaign. They are going to play the third one, but they're taking a little bit of a break. So it does seem like this is a game that would benefit from maybe taking a little break between campaigns. I think you have a good point about this campaign. I should say that I really do think it seems like we're all on the same page, that this campaign structure of scenarios that tie together with some branching, some direction about what goals are, and this ground shiver that sort of corrals you around are all huge wins. They really work well. They really break up the game into manageable chunks. So, and most of the scenarios were nice, compelling. Each one had a little change of feel. So really, the only complaint here is that as a total arc of the campaigns, it sort of fizzled out at the end. John says, I guess for the record, I was a little frustrated about my bad sense of direction. I do think I've recalibrated by now. I understand how the map works better and know not to overthink routes. Yeah, I do think that maybe that's what the feathers are for. But it would have been nice if we could use the maps, if the maps were more of a puzzle where we could use it to plan routes. I think that would have been enjoyable if we were like, we heard about things looking like certain things, and we could use the map like a puzzle and reason about a good route to take or a good place where we could find the thing we're looking for. It would have been nice if that overview map had more of a role in that. But maybe that's what the feather cards are about, and we just didn't lean into that enough. Feathers were vital. Philip Campbell says, I wonder, will the new threat go in a different direction? Do you mean the new threat you haven't played, or do you mean the new Kickstarter threat? Jonathan says, I guess another thing, I wouldn't mind it being even creepier or more straight horror. Well, I agree with you. I'd love to see the next iteration of this be in a darker, scarier world. I think that would be great. Philip Campbell says he's talking about the second original threat. Cody and Autumn say it's definitely harsher, more challenging. There is a new Kickstarter. It's coming out in June 4th, so a couple weeks. It's going to be it's clear they are going to add at least one new threat, but mostly it's going to be for people to buy the 7th Citadel, back it again for a second print run. I am curious what they add. 7th Continent got a full big box expansion eventually with as much content as in the original. I would love if they did that for the 7th Citadel. I don't think we're going to get it on June 4th, but maybe in a year or two we'll get another big box expansion here. John says, the art with the coffin sticking out of the ground, the ruins and worms made me think it would be even creepier. Philip says, are you going to play on Circus Grounds? Yes. Do I have it behind me now? I don't think it is behind me. We are absolutely going to play on Circus Grounds. It was sent to me by a viewer. It's a cold case type escape room game. We're also going to get to play Missing in the Caribbean soon, too. Did we try the friendly hat with the giants? No, we have not yet. We haven't talked to the blue giants yet, but we'd have to find that hat again. It is blue. It does make sense that they would like it. What else? Circus Grounds looks beautiful. Yes, it does. John says, what did you think of the perpetually generating dungeon? It was a cute little gimmick, but I mean, I don't love it, partly because a huge part of the fun for me is mapping in this game. So I don't love that it sort of breaks the benefits of mapping, but it did work in making that place scary. I think I would have, but it's like the old text adventure games. There are some twisty mazes with passages are all like, it did make sense that it was a fun little twist to the game, but in general, I'd prefer to have the challenge be of mapping. John says, I feel the random number stuff made me more hesitant to keep exploring. I might have been more compelled to keep exploring if I wasn't worried about triggering the same traps over again. Yeah, I can see that. I wonder how much of the other quests are going to be in different areas and how much overlap. How much, what proportion of the world do you think we saw here? Like, there's our map. What do you think we saw? A third of the world? Half of the world? Are the other quests going to are going to be mostly on the same territory, but, a third off it? Or are the other quests going to be largely in totally different areas? I guess Cody and Autumn can tell us a little bit more about that. But we basically never went west of our starting position, and that's sort of in the middle of the map. Well, it's a little bit towards the west. But that does suggest there's a big chunk of land we've never seen to our west. All right. I think we're almost ready to wrap this up here. Anything else to talk about? Jonathan, any other thoughts about the game? Philip, any other thoughts about the game? From a game design perspective, there's so much interesting here about the enjoyment of exploration and discovery. And so many things that go against some of my intuitions about game design should be balanced, and you shouldn't make, like, one of the things when I'm working on High and Low, this mystery game, one of the golden rules that I had is you don't make a decision, don't force someone to make a decision that they can't logically puzzle out that could have a good outcome and a bad outcome. That's one of my golden rules for for writing a mystery game. Don't send someone in front of two doors where they have no way to choose which door to pick, and if they pick one, they fall down and break their leg, and if they pick the other one, they get some golden treasure. That makes complete sense to me from a game design perspective. It's either a puzzle logic game where they could reason it out, or you don't want them to have bad luck through no fault of their own. And what's so interesting here is that they really have a totally different philosophy. And I think it's worth chewing on, it's worth thinking about. And it seems to me that the philosophy here is that the goal is to, one, tell great stories, and sometimes those stories can be about misery and misfortune. And then the second element is that you can make the high points of the long game more satisfying if the player has suffered and had bad luck. And so that's a very different design ethos, and I think it's remarkable how well it works. It works because part of why it works is because it's sort of a game that's about telling stories and exploring, and it's long form. And you're not replaying the same mission over and over again. If you're playing a strategy game like Pandemic, you don't want horrible things to be happening to you that ends your game totally out of your control. But something like this, a bad thing happens, it's a fun story. In fact, most of the stories I remember most in this game are about misfortune that's happened to us. That's worth thinking about. And maybe it's something that one should think about when designing a game that's got story elements with misfortune, which is you can get away with misfortune if it's in the form of a memorable story John says, one final nitpick is maybe some of the natural exploration locations on the terrain card seem more punishing than interesting. Like we looked at some shrubs and just had to dodge them. Nettles, yes, it's true. I'm not sure I really remember a cool nature scene. Yeah, we did see a couple scenes that were relaxing enough that we could take a rest. I do think my idea, though, of how you avoid some of the grindy nature of a game like this would be worth embracing for the developers, which is that it should be much, because it's a game where you're having to recycle the same fog cards, retread over the same areas. I think I would lean in more towards trying to build things that the first time you go through them are these long drawn out discovery interactions, and then the second time you can bypass them or you know how to beat them. That happened occasionally, like you get places and you're like, we know not to look here, that's a bad thing. But maybe I would double down on that. Like, look, this force thing where you get confused here, that seems counterproductive. Just make it so the first time you go to it, you get confused, and then you feel like you've learned it. You've learned not to do that. I think there should be more of that. More when you learn, you speed up the process. John says, unless the story mission is explicitly about getting back to the Citadel, I think they should always give you that card that lets you pay 10 health to go back to the Citadel. That's a great point. That is a really great point. If the purpose of making you go back to the Citadel is that it's costly, like climbing to Everest, the people who die are the people who make it to the top but didn't save enough energy reserve to get back home. So it's absolutely valid to say the challenge is getting your goal and getting home, and you have to budget yourself for that. That's completely valid. But what Jonathan is saying is don't make the person spend 2 hours walking home just to test if they have enough energy to spend 30 cards getting home. Better to make getting there difficult and interesting, but then let them pay cards to come home if they have enough health so they don't have to do it. You could almost apply that as a general strategy. Imagine if, now I'm not sure this would work thematically, but mechanically, you could absolutely see, we had a bunch of times where we had some combat and we're like, this is going to take us a half an hour to run through this combat. Just tell me how many cards you want me to pay to bypass this. And you could almost imagine that if every encounter or challenge, whether it was fighting a monster or dealing with something else or getting home, what if every card had an alternate cost that was sort of a worst case cost? So like you'd see this, but on the corner it would be like, or throw away 20 cards. And then you could, if you're at the end and you have plenty of health and you're like, you know what? I don't actually want to spend a half hour walking through this process. Let me just pay the 20 cards and be done with it. That would be enjoyable. Same thing with getting home. Like, okay, I'm here. Maybe each card has a cost, if I've already explored it. I guess for walking, you just walk. But for the fog of war getting home, after you come out of the city, it would be nice to just be told, hey, just tell me how much it costs to get home, 10 cards, and I'll come home. Philip says, you do have a runaway card. Yes, that's absolutely true, but it doesn't work through fog. So sometimes we were in a quest where we came out of the city or whatever, and we just had to get home. It would be nice not to have to go through all of those fog encounters that we've already seen. There should be some rule, like maybe every fog card, if you've already encountered it once, you should have a number that you can just pay to bypass it. John the Warner says, do you like the rule about how we have to use all hope reborn if we ever just want health? That's a weird rule. I did like that it made us think about about collecting more of them. It added a little bit of a push your luck element. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I didn't hate it. It didn't hurt us. At least it didn't hurt us in the easy story mode. Maybe if you were playing normal mode where you're really worried about health, it could absolutely make you use up some cards for health that you didn't need and miss some upgrades. And since the upgrades were so enjoyable, I probably would have been a little bit more bitter about that. All right. We've got someone just asking a question mark. Hope Reborns are too valuable. I mean, we certainly wanted them to use all of ours for upgrades and not for health. It's a good point, though, Jonathan, about being able to go home instead of having to walk home. Anything else to talk about? Jonathan, could you maybe show Jude Michael the door? Anything else to talk about? Philip, what characters did you play? Thank you, Jonathan. Boy, it's been a long time since we had spammers come in. Any other final thoughts? Jonathan says it's been long enough. I was rusty. I ought to do it. Any final thoughts? The old magic guy and the stealthy guy. All right, so you took Arthur, which is who we took, and the old magic guy. Okay. All right. Well, 2.5 hours doing our little debrief. It seems appropriate for this game. I really loved the experience. I love being able to share it with Jonathan and everyone else who joined us. I love hearing about what you guys thought of the game. If you've watched this all offline, not live, post your comments on this video or come visit us in the Discord to talk about it, or on the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. There's a thread. We have a channel in the Discord about 7 Citadel, a thread on the Board Game Geek Guild about 7 Citadel. There's links to both of those in the YouTube page. I'd like to hear if you have differences of opinion, house rule ideas. This seems like a game ripe for house rules, and I'd be happy to hear more. Let me know if the videos I recorded were useful. Let me know if you'd like to see us play through another campaign. We'll definitely take a little bit of a break. I'll have to record a review. I'll try to record a very short spoiler-free review and then a very long discussion review. On the other hand, maybe this video here will serve as that discussion. I'm not sure. Okay, a pleasure as always. I'll see you guys on the next video.